Welcome back to Where Do We Go From Here? I'm your host, Scott Catello. Today we're taking a deep dive into one of the most powerful stories in all of Western philosophy, Plato's Allegory of the Cave, and asking what it can teach us about the truth in the modern world. You might be wondering why this subject and why now? Well, good question, and there are two good reasons. First, Plato's Republic has been one of the most influential and thought-provoking books I've ever read. And I keep learning its lessons even 20 years after I first read it. But second, and maybe more importantly, lately it feels like truth has become one of the great casualties of our time. Every day I see people either unwittingly or intentionally chasing distraction, distortion, or even outright illusion. And what worries me the most isn't that it's happening, but that so many people don't even notice it's happening to them. Or worse, they simply don't care. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not a psychiatrist or a philosopher, I'm merely a student of life, like many of you. The thoughts I share in this series aren't intended to be an outright lecture, but instead to really start a conversation, one that invites us to think more deeply about what truth really means in a world that often seems allergic to it. So today in this episode, we're going to explore what Plato's allegory reveals about our current moment, how governments, media, and algorithms shape the shadows we see, and what it takes to finally step into the light. So settle in, because this episode is all about seeing through the shadows and rediscovering what it means to search for truth in an age of distortion. So let's set the scene. For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of reading Plato's Republic, let me summarize the allegory of the cave so we can begin to understand the background of its relevance. Plato's allegory begins as he asks us to imagine a group of prisoners who have been chained inside a dark cave since birth. Their bodies and heads are fixed so they can only look forward at the cave wall. Behind them is a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners, other people walk back and forth carrying silhouettes of objects such as men, animals, and trees. These silhouettes cast shadows on the cave wall in front of the prisoners. Because the prisoners have never seen anything else, they believe the shadows are the only reality. They talk about them, name them, and think that nothing exists beyond what they see on the wall. Now picture that one prisoner is released, either by intervention or accident. At first he's shocked and confused. When he turns toward the fire, the light hurts his eyes, and he struggles to accept that the silhouettes he now sees are more real than the shadows. As he slowly finds his way outside the cave, the pain of the sunlight is even greater. At first, he can only look at the shadows cast outside, then reflections in the water, then real tangible objects themselves, such as actual trees, people, and animals. Finally, he looks up at the sun and realizes it's the ultimate source of everything he sees. This is the moment of enlightenment. He understands what he once took for truth was merely a poor, doctored imitation. Once enlightened, the free prisoner feels a responsibility to return to the cave and tell the others what he has discovered. But when he goes back, his eyes, now used to the sunlight, cannot immediately adjust to the darkness. He stumbles, and the other prisoners, well, they laugh at him. They refuse to believe his claims that the world outside the cave is more real than their own shadows. Now, Plato suggests that if anybody tried to free them, the prisoners might even become violent and kill the one who disturbed their certainty, or in this case, their truth. Philosophically, the allegory illustrates Plato's theory of forms, or the idea that behind the material world lies a realm of perfect, eternal truths, or forms, of which the physical world is only an imperfection reflection. The shadows are appearances. The world outside the cave is a realm of truth. And to an extent, the philosopher is the one who makes the ascent, grasping at reality beyond illusion. This simple setup is possibly one of the most powerful metaphors in philosophy. It shows us how easily we confuse appearances with truth. I feel for Plato, most of us live like those prisoners, content with shadows, mistaking images for the real thing. The questions for all of us individually are we content with only seeing shadows, or do we really want to strive for the truth? If there are those that are content with shadows or the illusion of truth, well, then why? Moreover, why are prisoners accepting of being prisoners? And finally, are you a truth seeker or a prisoner yourself? So, a quick few thoughts I have regarding the allegory. It's often said that many of us have heard someone state one time or another, the truth hurts, right? Well, there are 2 points from the passage I would like to illustrate to show what I think Plato is really trying to prove. The first point is when Plato describes when the prisoner is freed. At first, he's confused. The firelight hurts his eyes. When he sees the objects casting the shadows, he doesn't believe them. How could these strange, unfamiliar things be real when the shadows seem so, well, certain? And the second point is a passage of the freed prisoner being led out of the cave. Outside, the sunlight is blinding. His eyes ache. He resists, but slowly he adjusts. He sees reflections in the water and then the world itself, trees, mountains, and the sky. Finally, he gazes at the sun, the ultimate source of light and life. This, in my opinion, is directly the part of Plato's journey from illusion to knowledge and from belief to truth. But notice, it is painful. Truth is not comfortable. It unsettles us, it disrupts what we thought we knew, and it requires us to grow, change our way of thinking. I also believe that Plato uses the sun to represent the form of good, the ultimate principle, the source of all reality and knowledge. Just as there could be no darkness where there is light, we depend on light to make our visibility possible, and there really is no greater light than the sun. And my last point, and I would be remiss if I didn't discuss the passage where the freed prisoner returns to the cave, and here's where it gets a little interesting. The freed prisoner somehow is compelled to return to the cave to tell the others. We all understand that he knows the truth now, and we're made to understand that he's seen the real world. Yet when he goes back, the others don't believe him. They laugh, they resist, they cling to their shadows. In fact, Plato suggests even that they may kill him for disrupting their world that they feel is real. This is a kind of a radical claim about human nature. People don't just live in illusions, they often defend them. Truth isn't only hard to discover, it's often rejected outright because it threatens our comfort, our habits, and our power structures. So now that we have a bit of an understanding of the allegory and its meaning, I think it's most important to bring this into our current world and its relevance, and ask, where are today's caves and where are the shadows? Next, I'll dissect the most relevant shadows, in my opinion, for today's culture by looking at 4 key areas: social media, consumerism, the metaverse, and yes, most importantly, politics. Social media, shadows on the screen. Well, since we're talking about truth, and perhaps the lack of it, there's no better place to start than the current state of our media and social media. If you recall, Plato has asked us to imagine prisoners chained in a cave, forced to watch shadows cast on a wall. For them, those shadows were reality. Today, our wall is the screen. Our TVs, our phones, our smartwatches, and our laptops. And the shadows are algorithmically curated posts, headlines, and videos that fill our feeds. Many no longer go directly to primary sources or even make the attempt to challenge sources. We scroll through clips, sound bites, and commentary, often mistaking that filtered slice of reality for the whole truth. Just as prisoners accepted illusions as truth, we too are at risk of confusing what's projected at us for what is real. And researchers bear this out. A 2021 study published by PNAS found that users on Facebook and Twitter overwhelmingly engage with echo chambers, reinforcing their own beliefs rather than challenging them. In fact, just 0.1% of users are responsible for spreading 80% of all fake news online. And 3% of active accounts generate one-third of total content. Another study found that misinformation spreads 6 times faster on X, formerly Twitter, than verified accurate information, largely because falsehoods are engineered and intended to provoke emotion, not reflection or true understanding. In other words, today's shadows aren't random, they're engineered. Algorithms amplify what keeps us watching, what keeps us enraged, and, more importantly, what keeps everybody scrolling. A Nature Human Behavior study even showed that emotionally charged content, fear, outrage, tribal identity, get shared at an exponentially higher rate. These digital shadows are optimized not for truth, but for your engagement. And yet, there's also potential here. Social media has democratized access to information. It's allowed voices once confined to the back of the cave to speak directly to the world, as I'm doing right now. But to be candid, the same tools that liberate can also manipulate. The same screen that connects us can just as easily keep us chained up. Plato's allegory at its heart isn't about deception, it's about awakening. In my opinion, the challenge today isn't escaping the cave, it's for people to realize or even notice that they're already chained into a cave. To seek truth in a world of shadows means intentionally about what we consume, questioning what's reflected on our walls, and remembering that real understanding often begins the moment we look away from the light of the screen. If Plato's cave was about mistaking shadows for truth, then the modern consumerism might be the most advanced cave humanity has ever built. In the allegory, the prisoners gave names to the shadows and treat them as real things. Today, we do the same, but our shadows are logos, ads, influencers, and the shimmering images of the quote, good life projected on our screens. The cave wall has become a digital billboard, one that's always on, personalized, and designed to feel real. Think about the last commercial you saw. A car isn't just transportation, right? It's freedom, power, and self-expression. A pair of sneakers or tennis shoes isn't footwear. It's belonging, confidence, and identity. A pill just isn't medicine. It's the promise of control over your mood, your body, and your image. As a reminder, these aren't products, they're stories, shadows of desire cast by million-dollar spotlights. And the scale of those projections is enormous. Global advertising spending is projected to exceed $1 trillion by 2026, this year, according to Statista. That's $1 trillion not spent on making, well, better things, but on shaping better, you guessed it, illusions. Marketing doesn't just sell goods, it sells meaning. It sells us who we should be if we just buy the right thing. Psychologists have long studied what it does to us. There's a concept which I recently learned called hedonic adaptation, the tendency for the thrill of a new purchase to fade quickly, leaving us craving the next dopamine hit. The University of Michigan's Center for Human Growth found that happiness from material purchases lasts on average less than 9 months before returning to your original baseline. So we keep scrolling, we keep buying, upgrading, and more importantly, chasing shadows that move seemingly always out of our reach. Meanwhile, social media platforms have become powerful amplifiers of this consumer illusion. A 2023 Pew Research study showed that nearly 40% of Gen Z consumers say their purchase decisions are influenced by social media trends. And according to Deloitte, nearly 60% of online shoppers admit that social media makes them feel pressure to keep up with others' lifestyles. It's no coincidence algorithms are designed to pair emotional triggers with purchasing pathways. The buy now button just isn't convenient, it's psychological architecture, built in to capitalize on conditioned responses. And looking at this in Plato's terms, we're chained not by iron, but really by dopamine. We all sit in digital caves watching the flicker of idealized lives, comparing, desiring, consuming, believing that fulfillment is one purchase away. But it never really is. So Plato's warning still echoes. When we confuse projection for substance, when we let algorithms define desires, and then we become prisoners of our own consumption. Next, let's talk about technology and the metaverse. In Plato's cave was a metaphor for mistaking illusion for reality. Then our age of immersive technology has brought that metaphor to life. Virtual reality, augmented reality, and the emerging metaverse are not just like the cave, they are the cave, rebuilt in pixels and code. We've created digital environments so vivid, so absorbing, that the shadows have become entire worlds of their own. In the Republic, Plato imagined prisoners chained in darkness, watching flickering images they believed were real. Today, the glow comes not from a fire, but from LED screens and headsets. And the shadows? They're avatars, curated feeds, AI-generated realities, crafted all to feel authentic. Platforms like Meta's Horizon Worlds, Roblox, and VR Chat allow millions to live, build, and socialize inside digital realms that blur the boundary between the real and the virtual. In 2022, McKinsey & Company projected the metaverse could generate $5 trillion in global value by 2030, transforming sectors like retail, education, and entertainment. For many, this isn't escapism, it's opportunity, creativity, and even community. But Plato would ask, does this bring us closer to the truth, or does this pull her deeper into the shadows? Perhaps there's evidence suggesting both. On one hand, these spaces can empower expression and equality. A 2023 Stanford study found that participants in VR empathy simulations showed measurable increases in compassion toward marginalized groups. The metaverse, in that sense, can help people see beyond themselves. It can illuminate new forms of understanding. On the other hand, these same digital caves can amplify the very illusions Plato warned us about. According to the Center for Countering Digital Hate, a researcher in VR Chat was exposed to over 100 instances of harassment, abuse, or explicit content in under 1 hour. Meanwhile, a Pew Research in 2023 reports that 60% of adults believe social media platforms make it harder to distinguish truth from lies. The same systems that immerse us also manipulate us, rewarding the loudest shadows, not the brightest truths. The danger isn't in building these digital worlds, it's in forgetting that they are worlds we built. The metaverse, like the cave, is not inherently evil, it really is more of a mirror. It reflects both our highest creativity and our deepest need for control. The challenge is whether we can step outside often enough to remember the sunlight, to remember that there's still a world beyond the headset, beyond the feed, and beyond the projection. And maybe the biggest question is if the cave that's created is so beautiful, very profitable, and addictively immersive, will we ever want to leave? Politics. Of all the places Plato's allegory of the cave echoes in our modern world, politics may be where it hits the hardest. In Plato's story, the shadows weren't random. Somebody had to place the objects in front of the fire to cast those illusions. In our modern cave, those shadow makers are political operatives, government strategists, media conglomerates, and the algorithms that determine what we see on our screens. Each plays a part in deciding which version of reality the public stares at, and which truths are quietly kept in the dark. Today's fire isn't the flicker of a torch, but the constant glow of 24-hour news, curated feeds, and viral posts. These systems are not built for truth, they're built for attention. And in politics, attention is power. Outrage, fear, and division spread much faster, reach farther, and stick longer than nuisance or balance ever could. And that's not speculation, it's actually measurable. A 2023 MIT Media Lab study found that false political stories spread 6 times faster on social media platforms like X, formerly Twitter, than factual ones. Why? Because misinformation provokes emotional responses. Fear, anger, validation, and that all drives engagement. The system doesn't reward truth, it rewards reaction. Additionally, a Pew Research Center report showed that 64% of Americans believe social media has a mostly negative impact on the direction of the country, largely due to misinformation and polarization. In effect, our political fires burn hottest where shadows are most profitable. Even within democracies, truth can become a casualty of strategy. Governments have long understood the psychological power of narrative control. From, quote, weapons of mass destruction in the Iraq War to the selective framing of protest movements, the mechanism is always the same. Define shadows, control the perception, and strengthen the narrative at all costs. And this is where Plato's insight feels almost prophetic. He warned that when someone escapes the cave and sees the light, when a truth teller returns to expose the illusion, the others, if you recall, resist. They ridicule him, call him dangerous, and may even try to destroy him. Today, we see that same instinct in how societies treat whistleblowers, investigative journalists, and reformers. Today's whistleblowers, whether one agrees or likes them or not, are modern examples of Plato's freed prisoner, punished for trying to reveal what lies beyond the projected image. So why does this continue to not only happen, but seemingly escalate? Well, I think to understand why this works, and why so many cling to the shadows, all we have to do is look at our own human psychology. People are not simply fooled by misinformation, they're comforted by it. Cognitive biases make us seek information that supports what we already believe. The backfire effect shows that when presented with evidence contradicting our own beliefs, human nature is often to really double down rather than reconsider. It's not logic, it's identity. Politics today isn't just about ideas or policy. To most, it's about belonging. And the shadows on the wall have become the symbols of what has become political tribes. And that's the true genius of modern political illusion. It's really now participatory. Most are not just watching the shadows, most are helping to cast them. Every tweet, every share, every outrage-fueled comment adds another layer to the wall. The challenge for all of us is discernment. To pause and ask, wait, who's holding the fire? And who is really benefiting from the shadows that I'm seeing? Plato's message still rings true. The cave is comfortable, but it still isn't reality. And stepping into the light, especially in politics, is going to take some real courage. But perhaps in a way that's where democracy begins again. Not in echo chambers, not in algorithmic loops, but in the willingness to see what lies beyond the wall. I thank you for sticking with me to the end of this episode, as you may be asking yourself, so why does this really matter to me? Well, Plato's allegory isn't just a story about a cave, it's a story about all of us. Media and social media shape our shadows. Consumerism manufactures illusions of happiness. Technology and the metaverse create digital caves where we spend more and more of our time. And politicians continue to manipulate narratives to keep us chained. So where do we go from here? Well, my final thoughts are that Plato's allegory of the cave wasn't just a story about ignorance. It was a challenge, maybe, to all of us. It asks us whether we're willing to turn away from the comforting glow of the illusion and make the painful climb toward truth. 2.5 millennia later, that climb for society has only gotten steeper and more challenging, as I mentioned. Our caves are no longer carved from stone, they're built from screens, algorithms, and our own echo chambers. The shadows aren't cast by fire anymore, but by data, politics, and profit. We should start by noticing the shadows, by questioning what we're shown, and possibly most importantly, who is holding the fire behind it. We should seek truth not as a weapon to win arguments, but as a light to see each other a little more clearly. That means valuing curiosity over certainty, dialogue over division, and courage over comfort. And in a sense, maybe that is where we go from here. That being said, I'll leave you with a quote from one of my favorite writers, Walt Whitman, that I always think about from time to time. And he said, "Be curious, not judgmental." Thank you for joining me today on Where Do We Go From Here with Scott Catello. And if you found this episode thought-provoking, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and definitely send me your thoughts or questions. I'd love to hear how you feel about this episode, and certainly about this particular series. And since this was a bit of a deeper episode, I would love to hear your thoughts and challenge my own thoughts within this episode. And if you like the content, remember to hit the follow, like, or subscribe button on your listening platform, as this podcast can only grow through support from people like you. And keep the show ideas coming, or if you have a series idea, I would love to hear that as well at catelloscott@gmail.com. As I said earlier, this is the first episode of a 4-part series, And in the next few episodes, I'll be discussing behaviors as to how people formulate their beliefs, ignoring and despite the truth. So please join me for the next episode in this truth series where I will discuss the subject of confirmation bias. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep turning toward the light. Till next time.